Cosmoverse in Medellin, and I caught up with Jacob.
Hey,
How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. You?
I'm pretty good. How are you enjoying Medellin so far?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, look up there. Like, this is a truly beautiful city.
Yeah.
In fact, maybe the prettiest in terms of landscape and such I've ever seen. Plus, we have Nerd Festival 2022.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely the Nerd Fest in the like sort of place where we're at is giving it some very cool vibes.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So yeah, I mean, like, I feel like you're kind of everywhere. I see you on all the threads of like all the topics. So I don't really know like where to start.
Mhm.
But I guess what's the thing that you're most interested in right now? Like, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, so
What's taking up most of your mental bandwidth at the moment?
that would definitely be multi-chain contracts.
Okay. All right, this is a good one.
Yeah. So, like, my expectation is that most chains are going to end up having CosmWasm natively.
Yeah.
And that, like, we will, past paradigm of Cosmos. And this is, how fast the evolution is occurring. In May or June 2020, we launched Osmosis.
Yeah.
And Osmosis connected chains to other chains, right? So if you think of each chain like a computer, okay, now we have a network of computers talking to each other through the IBC relayers. And this is actually how I got started. Was, one, validating Osmosis, but then two, things started to move quickly, I think because we began to relay. Other chains would ask us to come and validate because we were relaying and really relaying at some scale. But we were just moving tokens. And IBC it's a networking protocol. It can do a lot more than just move tokens between two chains.
Yeah.
So since maybe August of last year, I've been talking about, all right, when do we take the next step? And I always figured that the next step would be application data moving between chains. And currently, I think we can see two really clear paths to that actually happening. On one hand, we have Quicksilver and basically Go modules that use interchain queries. So like if I want to know the price of assets on Osmosis, I can do that. I can query the GAM module or the TWAP module, and I can learn about both current and historical prices. And
Querying the chain, using interchain queries.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. With CosmWasm, I think it's easier though.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So you would have a contract that could call functions on another contract on another chain.
Exactly.
Does it go further than that? Is that it? Like, I mean, because you say cross-chain contracts, to me, it's just like interchain accounts and interchain queries.
Well, do you remember Napster?
I do.
Okay, so Napster, like, your computer would download MP3s from other people's computer, right?
Yeah.
And you had a program on your computer was connected to the internet, and then your program, it would talk to other instances of your program.
Yeah.
If each chain is a computer, and each contract is a program that can talk to other programs like it, that's kind of where we're heading.
Okay.
So if you look at, say, Juno and Chihuahua even, okay? You take Juno and Chihuahua. They both have all the necessary code in place to do interchain contracts, or Juno and Secret, same thing.
Yeah.
You can call the functions. You can also query the remote contract, learn what its state is, compute against that state, commit that state to, let's say chain A is making the query, commit that, and then do more things. That could call even additional contracts. Mars Hub, I was just talking with Larry actually, is going to really heavily use that pattern. And I think that this could, as much as 100x, the transaction volume for relayers generally. This will cause other problems, but we'll solve those. And what we're going to get, though, I think, is a new breed of applications that they don't live on a single chain. this new breed of applications could have a front end that talks to multiple chains and multiple contracts on multiple chains, and those chains could synchronize their contract state.
Yeah, okay. So the contract state can get synced between those chains, and so what are the applications here? Like, give me some practical examples of things that one can build, or maybe that, I don't know, are you building anything using this technology?
Currently, we're not building that. We're kind of focused at Notional on the layer below that.
Yeah.
But it's likely that we'll begin to, I'd say, in the next version of chain upgrades. So like we're working on the code that enables those features. And we're also working on various adapters. Like we wrote code that makes CosmWasm support SDK46. We did basically...
What's SDK46?
SDK46 is the new version of the Cosmos SDK.
Okay.
Yeah. And we did the same with IBC. We upgraded the IBC code so that it could support SDK46, and all of this is really in support of the multi-chain contracts. There's a thesis here, actually, which is sort of, if we as a validator and as a relayer, we support the development of all this technology, that's going to make our validation and relay services more attractive, and it's also going to help, Cosmos to grow in aggregate, which... as we've expanded, that's become kind of a key goal of ours. It's like, if you're validating, I think we're 33 to 35 chains, depending if we count test nets that will be mainnets soon, it just becomes a question of how do you actually support the development and growth of the ecosystem. And we've decided to do that through writing software.
Yeah, and I think it's such a good sort of combination of skills, right? To be running validators, but also be writing the software and contributing to software as a validator.
Yeah,
it's like a great fit for those two sort of business models. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. The way that started was actually relaying, because that got us good exposure to infrastructure problems.
Yeah.
Now you asked about specific projects, though. I think that the first is likely to be WinDAO. The second is DAO itself.
Yeah.
So Jake has been doing a lot of work.
I think DAO has lots of potential for this kind of cross-chain contract stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It can be coordinating groups between chains instead of just being fully dedicated to just one.
I think the implication for DAO, the ability for a DAO to control a contract and for contracts to control DAOs, I think is some of the most interesting stuff that I've seen. Say, we've seen this in Ethereum for some time now,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like all the tooling is there to do this, and there are many sort of contracts that do, organizations that do this. But in Cosmos, the tooling's not quite there yet, and DAO is still DAO is great, but it's still dependent on these sorts of things existing and being well deployed. And so I'm really just looking forward for all this stuff to kind of work. One of the things that we're thinking about at Interop and the validators that we're running, I actually want to talk to you about this because I think you could really help me figure out the technical stack here. Is we want to do public goods funding from a validator perspective.
Okay.
So as a delegator, you would accept to pay a higher commission when delegating to Interop. You'd pay something like 20% commission. We would take some percentage to run the infrastructure, but then the rest would go to a DAO, and that DAO would be controlled by the token holders, who would be actually the delegators.
Right.
So we need to figure out a way to have the voting power in this DAO to
reflect
the delegations,
yeah.
which can change, right? So there needs to be some sort of rebasing mechanism, or I don't know what, but that's the first challenge. And the other challenge is, once the funds are in this DAO, how does that work, where the delegator gets to decide where those funds get sent?
Okay.
So that's layer one. Phase one. Phase two would be to have this available for delegators of any chain, right? So if someone's delegating with you, they can use our interface and say, I want 10% or 20% or 40% or 100% of my rewards to go to this DAO.
Yeah, this
and then
is good.
I'm going to use that that money is going to public goods funding. And then there may be even a third phase. And the third phase would be to have, the sort of like degen version that's like unregulated, unstructured. You do it, you don't really care about like, the implications, your sort of like fiscal implications.
Yep.
But we could also have a sort of institutional version of this that would have the DAO, or at least part of those funds, be controlled by some sort of a nonprofit,
right.
And investors could buy tokens, delegate them, and then get some sort of a tax refund because they'd be effectively donating to a nonprofit that's funding public goods.
Yeah.
So like there's like different phases to this. Of course, the legal aspect I think is like a very challenging one that we're going to try to figure out. But the technical parts where effectively you need to rebase the DAO thing.
That's doable.
Oh, okay,
yeah,
good.
Yeah,
right.
That's definitely doable. You could query the staking module to learn who's delegating, and then I think it's not actually that hard, that particular piece. So making voting in the DAO reflect your current delegations is probably not too hard. The next piece of that, you mentioned a legal wrapper.
Yeah.
So I would say to speak with Jake about that. Jake Hartnell.
Yeah.
Because he's working on specifically that, like integrating that with DAO. And, well, so then, okay, I have a question for you, though.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like market appeal, right? Public goods funding has, traditionally not been super great. This includes from like community funds and stuff. I think there's a project called Complay, okay? And you may want to talk to them because what I'm finding, just after accruing some experience in validating and participating in governance and stuff, is that token holders are, very deeply economically concerned. You could say that's even the primary concern, right?
Yeah.
And so, you might want to loop in. See, this is where it becomes a security, though. Right? Because like what you're saying is what you'd be saying is that somehow your delegators would benefit from the fact that they're paying a higher commission.
They're not.
You're not saying that.
They're not benefiting. They're donating their commission.
Right.
We're just helping them do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that. Like, I'm concerned that might not actually accrue much in terms of delegations, unless you're able to rigorously prove that, you're impacting, say, like the token price of the chain or, a secondary value capture mechanism, right? Potentially tied to your validator. So I'd consider that portion of it a lot. Now, I like this, and I think that, next piece is hard, right? So you're advocating for public goods funding.
Yeah.
Yes, this is good. All throughout Cosmos, I think that actually the greedy play is to do public goods funding with some caveats. So I'm sure you're aware that there have been governance proposals that have funded like questionable things. And I'm sure that you're also aware that the majority of new and aggressive projects fail. This, it's over 90%, might be over 95%. So how do you account for those two things, right? What you don't want, in my opinion, is to lose experimentation. And I think we are kind of in Cosmos because funding new work, it often goes through governance.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're looking at it in a realistic fashion.
You mean that governance isn't looking at public funding as in a realistic fashion? In terms of evaluating the sort of value of the things that we're funding, their impact, this sort of thing?
Well, yeah, and then also getting used to a failure rate of around 90%.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell. But it's also the truth, right? Like any innovative, new, advanced tech project, the failure rates are actually very high.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we stick with the current, let's say, very conservative funding model that we're currently pursuing, we won't ever really get into, I mean, I think you're setting up a VC fund. You
Yeah.
probably know people who run them currently. So you probably know that they'll, invest in many projects knowing that many simply will not work.
Name of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd love to see governance get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had also thought of doing the fund as a DAO, but yeah, I think the tooling just wasn't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
But also at scale, it's maybe hard to do due diligence.
I think that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also, I have very sort of opinionated views about like what I want to fund, right? And so like a DAO is just like it's not to say that one couldn't sort of be involved in both those things. I mean, of course, like having a DAO that funds things is interesting because you get to see all sorts of other projects and also projects that wouldn't get VC funding, right?
Yeah.
Like things that just don't pass. They're not economically viable for investors, but they need to get funded. So that's the kind of the motivation to do this project. And so yeah, we're in the initial phases of scoping it out, and like having conversations like this is also very interesting from a sort of practical perspective, but like also the technical aspects.
Yeah, I'm curious. How many people have you spoken to about that validator model, where the fees are higher but you're funding public goods?
Yeah, like quite a bit. Yeah.
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 And what were the responses?
Pretty unanimously positive. Yeah. Now, whether or not people just like the idea or whether they would actually delegate to a validator that's taking 20% is a different story. But I mean, there is precedent for this. So like in FMOS, you're aware that there's a top 5 validator, top 10 validator that takes 100% commission.
FMOS for volunteers.
Yes. And then there's another one in there that takes like 30%. I think they're funding some sort of a workshop, or I don't know, but like this exists.
Yeah.
And like what I'm saying is let's do something similar, but where there's an actual community of people that want to delegate their funds, but also investors that are looking to invest in crypto, but also have this kind of like ESG, maybe angle to their investments, and they're investing in the crypto. They're getting rewards for their investment by delegating and getting staking rewards.
Yep.
But they're also getting to do this sort of virtuous thing of funding public goods.
Yeah.
And what do you? Yeah, just maybe like we can wrap this up. But
okay.
What do you think of Atom 2.0 and what was announced this morning?
Okay. Boy, all right. First of all,
this might take a
while. Not really, because okay. Well, the vision is quite clear.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of questions that I don't have answers to about specifically the MEV portion of the vision. I'm curious, like in what ways, if at all, Skip will be involved.
Skip. This is MEV
Builder. Exactly. Yeah. And MEV is kind of new to me. I actually, like, on a chain-by-chain basis, Notional is going to ask the community if they want us to do Skip. I find their work really intriguing. But, that I think that there could be trade-offs, the scary kind, right? And the cool thing about Skip is that they've been really, really direct with me on all this stuff. And so I'm very interested to see their work evolve. But with Atom 2.0, all right, my downside, or my question actually, not even a downside, is the MEV stuff. And
what's your burning question?
Oh, my burning question is, are we optimizing the stack for MEV or because we're going to make all of these new technical features that, in my opinion, it looks like they can be used for MEV or against MEV. Even more interestingly, it looks like we're kind of turning the hub into a MEV platform. I would be really interested, actually, if you speak to Zucky, ask him this question, right? Because I think
I
that
talked to him this morning.
You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did he tell you, like, we're turning the hub into a MEV platform, or?
No.
Okay.
No, he didn't tell me we're turning the hub into a MEV platform. But yeah, I'm not sure what his opinion is on this, because like there is this, I think this this dichotomy of, some people think that MEV is good, and that, that MEV is going to happen, and we should just have like marketplaces for, like the market to like extract the value and reallocate it in ways that make sense. And then you have other people on the other side that think that we should try to combat MEV.
Yep.
Right. And I was talking to Braps a couple of weeks ago, and he says when you try to combat MEV, you're just like moving those externalities somewhere else, and you're making a trade-off about like where the MEV is effectively being extracted. And so I think that I'm of the opinion that you should just let the market figure it out. And yeah, I'm also quite new to MEV, right? So like, had a few conversations, but I would tend towards being more on the sort of like market aspect. And in this case, I think it makes sense for the hub to have these functionalities internalized. And yeah, like the auction mechanism, I think is cool. So like basically you can have builders, and this is the way I understand it. So like builders like Skip or Mecha Tech or whatever, like they just basically now get to auction off or participate in an auction to bid for block space.
Yep.
And then the validators get to auction off their block space. But there's an assurance. So for the builder, the block builder, there's an assurance that their block is going to get executed, which is not the case now, because now like if you run Skip or Mecha, you're effectively like they are trusting that the validator is going to run that block, right?
That's
like
right.
The validator could take out the transaction that is paying the builder. So yeah, I think I mean my and this is just from hearing this today, my gut reaction is that it's a good advancement.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting.
Definitely.
I mean, like, because it also seems to involve ABCI++.
Yeah.
And okay, so it seems like the Atom 2.0 question kind of segued directly into MEV. I think this is because this is the part that I find most interesting. I think it has the most promise and the most peril at the same time. Liquid staking kind of falls in this category too.
Yeah.
We contributed to that module to kind of get it ready for IBC and CosmWasm. And in it, I see something that couldn't be built without a blockchain, something very technically bold, and something that most likely does increase risk. MEV, I kind of feel the same way about. And so, like, my thought on this right now is sort of keep coding, and we've set the direction. There will be governance proposals and things. So, if anybody wants to pull the brakes on stuff, there'll be a GovProp to do that. Right now, I don't want to pull the brakes. I'd vote yes. Both, actually. But when I did that, I would talk about the risks. I'd say, like, no, I'm not certain, but I like it. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Hey, thank you.
Thanks so much, man.
Certainly, man.
Yeah.